back at it today on the inside of the car. I'm gonna start with this super simple issue that I've got. I just had to make a notch because of how the top of the shock was going to sit against the floor, so I just have to cover that up. And there you go, one tab covering up that hole, easy to take off if I need to. I might run a little bit of silicone around there just so that nothing's coming into the cab. So now, on to the big stuff. I want to pull this piece out and make a mount for the Terminator Control panel. I also need to start wiring things for the Terminator underneath, and I have to make a pass-through for the cabling to go into the engine compartment. Okay, so the control panel is removed. You can see my wonderful wiring hiding back there. Terminator control box. Basically what we need to do is just mount it something like that. I'd like for it to sit out a little bit more. I don't know, maybe that's just me. But what I've got is I grabbed this. This is actually a bracket for a taillight on a transport. And I'm gonna play around and get something figured out with this. Of course, it doesn't need to stay this neat and tidy. I had actually thought about attaching it like this, but obviously we're hitting the bottom of the dashboard. So it is basically the width that we need to cover this hole up, which is great. Looks like a bit of a cup holder there. All right, I'm gonna get on this. Put your brackets on the side to close stuff in, put those little tabs on the side so that I can probably just put some self-tappers through to put it against the dashboard. Doesn't have to look pretty.
And now you're ready for a night on the town.
Homer, you've got it set on whore.
We're just gonna go in like that. So I'll drill that in, get it mounted up, and then I'm gonna see how I want the controller to sit on there. What I've done here is cut a circle out, filled this hole in because I want this to just sit nice and lined up about there, but there's no sense in having a whole big chunk hanging out at the bottom. I'll probably hit it with my knee, or it might be in the way or whatnot. Some people will probably think to themselves, well, why didn't you just bend your own metal? Well, I could have done that, but this was like $4. It was easier to work with this and work with some metal that I had at the shop than it was to go and find another chunk, because I don't think I would have had a piece big enough. And it's a nice bend there. Bottom is cut off. Here's the plastic bracket for the control screen. Found some small stainless bolts here. Countersunk them a little bit. There we go. Let's put it in the car and see how it works. And there we go. I think that looks very nice, and it's solid on there. Nothing's moving. What's nice too is I can take the screen out. It's low enough. Put it back in if need be. There. There is the main wiring harness that has to go into the engine compartment that runs off of the Terminator.
I'm a friend of Sarah Connor.
I've got to get it through the firewall. I'm thinking this is probably going to be the best spot to do it. Going in here and looking at where the Terminator is mounted. So I'm gonna have to cut through there and make a bracket of sorts. So after a couple failed attempts at trying to make my own bracket, one of the problems being that I can't find the proper hole saw size, I went up to the store and found this. Now it did have a flange on the back, and I just ground that off. So the idea is going to be that I will try to see if I can cut this in half, put some of this rubber trim around the inside, and then cut a hole and put it on the firewall. So cut that thing in half. It is a little bit wider than the diameter of the cable bundle, but right now that means that I can cut a hole in the firewall and I can get these cables run through. All done. Got my trim ring on here. Then I found this old rubber grommet that fit perfectly right in the middle. It's squeezed in together nicely, so nothing is gonna move there. And we are hooked up. So I did some work off camera because it really wasn't very exciting work, but I did get a lot accomplished, and it's gonna be interesting now to have a look at what has gone on. So, managed to get all of this stuff connected up on the firewall here, mounted my relay, mounted my fuse, ran the PCM control out. I had to kind of unwrap and rewrap some stuff here because I found wires were in the wrong spot and they were going to rub. So right now, everything is nice and tidy there. And if we wander inside, it's kind of hard to see. Flick this light on. But I've started to get everything run nicely in here. Got my grommet on the wall here so we don't end up running into any little issues with rubbing. And then we've got all the wires run up into this space. Put a little bit of door edge trim for a car, which is the same stuff that I used over here. A few more things ticked off the list that I have been working on in the middle of the car. So first off, had to run another cable from the back. As an addition, I'm putting in a switch panel, which was supposed to be here this weekend, but it's still on the way. What I'll probably be doing is replacing this switch bank here. The reason being is because I really have no way of labeling them and I know I won't remember what they are. The other thing too that's pretty cool that I've hooked up, got the tap mounted up kind of where I think I want to keep it. It was centered. I wasn't super happy. That looked kind of weird. The next step up is covering up this hole. So what I'm going to do is take my handy tape, which I've already started doing, cover this up, mark out my kind of template with a marker, then I'll get over to my piece of metal and get it figured out how I want to cut that out. So there I go. Lucky that tape wasn't very sticky, came off super easy. So what I'm gonna do now is cut that out so that I can put that template on my metal, cut that part out and see how well she fits. This thing comes in handy constantly and I often forget about it. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this over to the grinder and start shaping it. This is a very rudimentary shape. My tape worked well, but not perfectly. So then I'll just keep grinding and fitting and grinding and fitting and grinding and fitting until it is all nice. And it's thick, so I'm gonna have to end up giving it a bit of a bend too. So I've got everything cut up and bent up. Metal's still a little bit hot here. So I just went over to the door sill of the car and then bent it around like that. And you can see, put it over here and it fits up quite nice. So now I've just got to drill some holes and put some screws through and that part of the car is done and covered up. Well, there we go, all bolted down. Well, actually, sheet metal screwed down. I did mess up right here. I probably could have made it a little bit wider, but you know what? I'm not sure exactly if I'll put some seam sealer around there, but it's not going anywhere and it covers up that big hole. Not that many people are gonna see it, it's gonna affect performance, but it looks okay. Okay, so to end off this episode, I've got 2 quick things left to do. Well, actually, 1 quick thing, probably, and 1 lengthy thing, I imagine, because there's no way it's gonna go as easy as I'm hoping. I picked up one of these switch panels. I figured that would be a little bit easier than how I've got things hooked up right now. So it's one of those guys that you've got all these little tabs that you can put on, and there's what the panel looks like. So my first thing I've got to do is head on back to the back of the car and start doing some installation on my panel back here to connect up the reset switch. This is what it looks like. Power in, power out, and then I guess if something trips, you click on that and it resets. There we go, all wired up. I'm trying to keep this as tidy as possible. I'm gonna have to go get myself a few more zip ties to make it look nice, but overall, so far, it's not too messy, I don't think. Next up is on to part number 2, and this is going to be the interesting one. So, what I'm going to do next is mount the main distribution block. Top comes off here, it clicks on, and so I've got to connect my grounds, and then I've got to connect my positive and stuff like that into here, and then I've got to start running my accessories onto those guys. Not probably a huge job, but it is going to be interesting to get some spots for it. So that's what I'm going to work on first, get this mounted, and then I'll start rewiring things because they are already hooked up to my one panel there. So I've got to start disconnecting that stuff. Okay, folks, we are done. Like I said earlier before we blipped over, started with this guy here, reset button. That means it's on, that means it's off. This little cover has to go back on, but it is all completely wired up. Everything is done on that, which brings us over to the cab. Got our switch all hooked up, got some of our lights designated, everything is wired up underneath. I'm gonna flick my light on here. There's the control panel there, we're plugged in. Haven't put the cover on yet because I still have to run some more wires for some other functions. I will probably delete these guys, unfortunately. I had to get rid of them because it was just too hard to label what they are. This works out way better. And a final thing, which I was happy to get done too, steering stabilizer is on the front, all hooked up. Had a little bit of a problem with that because I misplaced the hardware and I couldn't find any other hardware here in my bins that would fit it. But I did finally find the bag and everything is all hooked up now. So that's it for this episode. We're all done. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching and have a good one.